I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm taking the taboos of menopause and peri-menopause and bringing light to the dark. No bullshit, no shame. It's time for us to gain a new paradigm in female health, out with the old and in with the new, and I'm bringing fresh perspectives from someone in the arena. I've been practicing women's health for nearly 20 years, and I'm spilling the tea on what it means to live at midlife, knowing that the best is yet to come. I'm sharing my Gen X approach to living through this transition. Sassy, a bit sweary, and always honest. Tactical tips and instantly usable information is my aim. I hope to make you laugh and that you learn something new that helps you embrace the change. Together, we bring power to the peri. Onward to the podcast. Have you ever wondered if psychedelics were something you should pursue for your mental health or for processing old trauma, even new trauma? Then this conversation's for you. I'm talking with founder of Psychedelic Coaching Institute and Third Wave, Paul F. Austin, today. He is a leading voice on the use of psychedelics for personal growth, creative insight, and professional transformation. He's also authored a book called Mastering Microdosing, which I recommend you read if you're interested, available on Amazon, and we'll link in the show notes here. I asked Paul how he found himself a psychedelics coach, and I expected, as is always the case when I have guests on the show, an academic response, and I didn't get that at all. So it was so refreshing. It was so refreshing to have a conversation with somebody who was called into service to share what he knew and understands about what psychedelics can do and provide for us. I asked him if they're safe. I asked him to describe what psychedelics are. What is a microdose? When can we take it? When shouldn't we take it? And what kinds of professionals we should have to help us if we wish to bring psychedelics into the experience of perimenopause and menopause. Essentially, Paul helped me with the applied practice of psychedelics, more specifically, microdosing. It's an emerging field of science. It's quite a fascinating conversation. Please understand, if you have sensitive ears around, there is discussion of recreational use, so you may wish to filter appropriately. Let me introduce my guest. Paul F. Austin, a prominent figure in psychedelics, has guided millions to safe and meaningful psychedelic experiences through his work as the founder of Third Wave and Psychedelic Coaching Institute. Featured in Forbes, Rolling Stone, and the BBC's Work Life, he pioneers the convergence of psychedelics, personal transformation, and professional success. Paul empowers leaders, creatives, and pioneers to leverage psychedelics for profound personal and professional growth. He views psychedelics as refined skills cultivated through mentorship, exploration, and purposeful use, critical for humanity's ongoing evolution. As the longest-standing and youngest entrepreneur in his field, Paul's focus on merging psychedelics with professional development is evident in his transformative training program, Practitioner Certification Program. The program caters to individuals who seek to integrate their psychedelic experiences into their business practices, all under the guidance of one of the industry's most trusted leaders. You can find out more about Paul and his work at thethirdwave.co or psychedeliccoaching.institute and also paulaustin.co. Without further ado, I hope you understand that the role that the psychedelics can play in your healing journey. Stay open to this one, sisters. I know it's a little bit of a step away from what we were taught, but the psychedelics have things to teach us, and Paul is here to guide us through that conversation. Thank you for listening. Here's something that might surprise you. When our estrogen drops during menopause, we don't just lose protection for our bones and our brain. We lose estrogen's protective effects on our heart. Your heart is packed with mitochondria, the cellular powerhouse that keep it beating strong. But as we age and go through the stages of menopause, oxidative stress can damage these mitochondria, affecting our cardiovascular health in ways we're only just beginning to understand. That's where MitoQ's hero ingredient, mitoquinol, comes in. It's the world's first mitochondrial target antioxidant that gets directly into your mitochondria, targeting stress at the source. Studies show that 20 milligrams per day of mitoquinol in older adults can improve arterial function by up to 42% and support healthy blood flow, exactly what our hearts need as we navigate this life stage. Ready to support your heart where it needs it the most? Visit mitoq.com and use my special code LOVELY10 for 10% off your first order. That's mitoq.com, code LOVELY10. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Let's talk about something incredibly important: your heart health. You probably already know the stark statistic. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. Now, it's widely understood that men develop heart disease earlier in life than women. But what you might not know is that this difference starts to change as women age. By the age of 65, women begin to develop heart disease at the same rate as men. Why does this happen? Well, the sources tell us that declining estrogen levels play a significant role. Estrogen has a profound impact on our cardiovascular system. It actively improves our cholesterol levels, keeps inflammation down, increases crucial blood flow around the body, and even helps to reduce damaging free radicals. Think of estrogen as a vital protector for your heart. It's important for our heart health, too, to take minerals. Certain minerals, such as magnesium and boron, are highlighted as being essential nutrients that our hearts and bodies need to function at their peak performance. When your mineral levels drop, it can lead to a decline in both your estrogen levels and your overall heart health. This is why I'm so enthusiastic about my partnership with Beam Minerals. They have formulated a fantastic way to make getting your daily electrolytes and essential minerals absolutely effortless. Forget about cumbersome pills or messy powders. Beam Minerals offers a simple solution. Just a small shot each day provides your body with the natural, plant-based support it needs. Ready to take proactive steps for your heart health and overall well-being? Head on over to beamminerals.com and don't forget to use my special code LOVELY to receive a fantastic 20% off your first order of Beam Minerals. That's LOVELY. Thanks, Beam. Hello, friends. I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. And today I'm joined on the show with Paul F. Austin, entrepreneur, author, coach, pioneer, founder of Psychedelic Coaching Institute, and Third Wave. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fiona. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, you've been on my schedule for a while, and I'm quite excited for us to have this conversation because I accidentally fell into a conversation about magic mushrooms many years ago by a patient who was using psilocybin to help with his chronic symptoms of traumatic brain injury or concussion. And because of that, I went down the rabbit hole and started to learn. And it was right around the time that Michael Pollan's book came out. And he did that amazing interview on the Tim Ferriss podcast. I think that's one that will go down in history as one that we refer to often. And of course, I was a fan of Michael Pollan before that. He just is an amazing journalist. And so I'm curious to have this conversation today. And where I'd like to start, if it's all right with you, is I'd like to hear your story. How did you end up here?
Well, as listeners may guess, it all started with acid, LSD back in the day.
Yep.
I'd say that was a huge aspect and part of it. I was raised in a traditional family in West Michigan, which is sort of small town. Grew up in a suburb of 15,000 people. Great public schools. Great athletics, music. I played violin, from the age of 5 or 6 up until 18. So I had a really good upbringing in that way. And, I had parents who were quite traditional, church every Sunday, no exceptions, mission trips every summer. And it was the sort of center point of our lives. And in Christian traditions, especially in the United States, they tend to be rule followers. There's this relationship, it seems, between Christians and people who like to follow rules. And so my parents were rule followers. So you can imagine their surprise when they found out their golden boy, because I was their only son, was smoking cannabis at 16, right? It sort of shook them up a little bit, partly because my mom's sister had struggled with addiction, and she was aware of what it could do. And also because my parents had never smoked weed in their lives, right? Like, this is a whole new thing, and it was illegal. And because it was illegal, it must be bad. And so they found out, and they sat me down one Sunday after church, and my dad looked at me and said, Paul, I haven't been this disappointed since my brother passed away in a car accident, which had happened 30 years ago, right? When my dad was 18, his brother had died in a car accident, as you can imagine, heartbreaking. And so that was the level of impact that this experience had on them. Well, that didn't stop me, as everyone can now tell. So a few years after that, I tried LSD, or I tried psilocybin mushrooms initially, and then LSD. I really had breakthrough experience with it. By that point in time, I was 19. I was pretty much an atheist, right? I had sort of rejected a lot of what I had been taught in church. I thought it to be a lot of nonsense. I'd started to get really into Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris's early work as well. And I thought, oh yeah, atheism is the way. And then I did LSD, and I was like, oh, okay, that was a bit of a detour. Let's come back to center here.
Yeah.
And through that experience, I came to recognize the value of the traditions that I had been raised with. But I was always meant to buck trends, to do unconventional things. And so at the age of 21, I moved to Turkey, where I taught English. I then became a digital nomad, traveled all over Europe and Asia for many years. And one of those spots that I lived in was Thailand, in Chiang Mai. And I started Third Wave in 2015 to start to educate people about the applied practice of psychedelics. And when I moved to Chiang Mai, I experimented with microdosing for the first time. A lot of my early work when I was 19 and 20, I did high doses of LSD. I started to microdose at the age of 25, did that for about 7 months, thought it was really impactful and interesting. And so I decided to start to teach other people how to do it. And so my sort of mission these last 10 years has been to normalize responsible psychedelic use, in particular microdosing, because it's a great entry point for most folks who are new to this. And I've had a blast doing it. It's been really, what's been, I think, gratifying is just to see how many people have come around to it now, even to the point where my dad, who was obviously very anti-drug, when Michael Pollan's book came out, he read the book, and then I actually guided him through a high dose mushroom experience. And so,
Wow. How did he do?
My parents really changed their mind. He did well. He thought it was interesting. It was a good opening experience. It wasn't like I didn't blow his mind, but he came to understand a little bit more about me and why I do what I do. And so my parents are now very supportive and on board with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. So I want to ask you about the moment you decided that other people needed to be taught what you were learning through the teachers of the psychedelics.
Well, I love to learn, right? So I'm a consummate learner. I love to read. I love to study. I'm very curious as a human. And so, from the age of 21, when I moved to Turkey, I was already teaching. I was teaching English. And then my first business that I started was also teaching English. So I just have that archetype. I love to learn. I love to teach. And at the age of 25, I, had no restrictions. I was gallivanting all across the world and, kind of living bootstrapped, I was super minimalist. I would carry everything in like a carry-on suitcase, this sort of thing. And I had so much freedom. There wasn't a lot of risk to be had. It's not like I had kids. It's not like I was an established professional. It's not like I'd even made any sort of name or reputation for myself. And so I thought, man, how cool would it be if, more people could benefit from this. And, I was also an entrepreneur. I saw that Tim Ferriss was starting to talk about it. I saw that clinical research was beginning to be done. I knew what was happening with cannabis. And so
Mhm.
I also made a bet that this would become a much bigger industry and business, and I could actually make a living doing this and supporting people. So it was definitely practical in nature, but for the most part, it's been very much a mission, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
very sensitive to this meta crisis that we find ourselves in, the ecological crisis being the foremost of that. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, what's the quickest way that we can help people to heal the relationship with nature and sort of reharmonize in that way? And I thought, oh, psychedelics as a
Yeah.
technology they do it better than almost anything else. They're volcanic, right? So they come with a lot of risks and particularities about how to use them.
That's the part I think that's been most misunderstood by our society. Now, you and I have a generational difference. So when I listened to you speak as a teenager about being a teenager, taking acid, I probably am your parents' age going, wait a minute, hold on a second, we have a problem. Like Houston, there's a problem here, right? But I love that you are acting as that sort of buffer between Gaia medicine and if we're talking about the natural substances, et cetera, we can have that discussion about what is and what isn't, and sort of the old way of thinking about these things as being drugs, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Which I always like to tell people, like, these are drugs. These are also medicines. Typically, the difference is the dose.
Huh?
And
Okay. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
true of most things, right?
Yes.
Dose
Yes.
medicine versus poison. There are some things where it's becoming very clear that are like alcohol is very toxic. But on the other hand, tobacco has been a medicine in the Amazon for a very long time. But because of the context in which it's been introduced to the United States and the Western world, it's become a poison in many
Yeah.
ways, right?
Yeah.
So I think when psychedelics are used with a sense of reverence, intention, when they're used with a sense of sort of gravity about what may unfold, the fact that you're connecting or communing with
Mhm.
an intelligence of some sort, an ancient intelligence is what it often feels like,
Mhm.
that it needs to be held in that way. And if it's not, then things can go off the rails pretty quick. And this is what we've seen with a lot of the kind of horror stories around psychedelics. It's because they really need at least a fairly structured container,
Yeah.
right? There needs to be some
A
structure around
context.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just for the listeners, this is in part what we're talking about is what's referred to in the psychedelic therapy parlance as set and setting. You've got to have the container and the respectfulness and also potentially the therapy of it. Hence someone to guide you. This is where a trip guide comes in, yes?
Yeah, or facilitation, right? I guess if the orientation is towards a therapeutic lens, then in more cases than not, it's helpful to have a clinical professional, someone who is medically trained. The problem with a lot of people who are medically trained is they've been conditioned into a particular system or way of thinking that is actually antithetical to what we learn from psychedelic experiences and other contemplative practices, right? So part of the tricky part right now is, what are the bridges between these traditional clinical environments and the sort of intelligence that comes online when working with psychedelics, and how do we train facilitators? Because, as you know, a lot of shamans who work with these medicines and have worked with these medicines across lineages, sometimes for unbroken for hundreds if not thousands of years, they are not medically trained in the
Mm,
Western sense, but they have a
mhm.
much greater attunement and skill at working in these spaces than a psychiatrist who goes to Yale or Harvard or Berkeley or wherever.
And isn't it true, though? By the way, I was going to say, spoken like a true psychonaut. I love that. But isn't it true that it's the medicine that gives you the lenses to see how medicine is a particular gathering of belief systems, etc.? Like, did you find as you were able to, as you train practitioners, did you find that as they take their own trips, their lenses start to change and their awareness starts to open of the system they've been trained in?
And it's why we say, as part of our training, right? We're now in our 10th cohort. We've trained a few hundred practitioners, some doctors, some coaches, some clinicians, a lot of folks. What I've learned is walking the walk is the most essential item in this work, right? That so one of the prerequisites before you even start the training is you have to have done your own medicine work, gone through a microdosing protocol, done a high dose journey, right? Like, this isn't just for people who are just getting started. A lot of people who do come into this work have actually, I would say the majority of people who come into this work have been personally impacted by psychedelics. There's very few people that I know of who are professionally in psychedelics who haven't, drank the Kool-Aid
Yeah, yeah.
themselves, which comes with pros and cons, but I would say it's predominantly pro in that you're learning the contours of this experience, or you're understanding it. You often have a teacher or mentor who is helping you to make sense of it, right? I think
Mhm.
this notion of mentorship, supervision is really essential when working with these medicines. And it doesn't fit within the traditional Western model. In many cases, the Western reductionist model does not have room for the sort of non-dual nature of what can
Mm.
emerge in a psychedelic experience. We have seen some bridges, like transpersonal psychology has started to be built, but there's still a really big divide between what we consider to be traditional healthcare and
Mhm.
psychedelic healing, and microdosing, I hope, is a good bridge between those.
Yes, yes, and I was gonna say one step at a time, and what I think the consumer, if you will, if we can refer to people who go to see the doctor as the consumer, if we're looking at it sort of from a high point, is saying, "I don't wanna be stuck on a medication for the rest of my life. I want you to give me options. What are the options?" And I think this is where the push towards psychedelics has been really very good, and I think there's a lot of openness. I've sensed a lot of openness from my colleagues in medicine who are saying we need better options, especially around mental health.
And institutions are starting to slowly come on board. We've seen Colorado legalize psychedelics. We've seen Oregon legalize psychedelics. New Mexico has medicalized psychedelics. There are probably 5 to 6 to 7 other states that are working on bills. The current FDA has been very pro psychedelic and supportive of potentially making it more accessible and available. And like you said, the traditional psychiatric model, SSRIs, Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers like Wellbutrin. You have benzodiazepines, right? We're starting to enter what I would consider to be a major crisis, which is these often don't make you better. They stabilize you, but they don't make you better. They're often what I've been studying more and more is this relationship between metabolic health and mental health, and how when we're metabolically healthier, when our mitochondria are healthier, when our cells are healthier, like we're also, a lot of mental disorders can also sort of resolve,
100,
let's say. And
100%.
so
Yeah.
psychedelics are a great boost to that, right? They
Mhm.
seem to be pro metabolic, they seem to be pro mitochondria, they're anti-inflammatory, whereas SSRIs and benzodiazepines are highly addictive. The withdrawal symptoms, especially from benzodiazepines, can be insanely gnarly.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, you know, people don't get better in the long term. They stabilize, they numb out, but we need, I think,
We need
another drug
options.
treatment that can
Yeah.
really kick people in the pants,
Yeah,
so to say, which
absolutely.
psychedelics can do.
Absolutely. We need options. Okay, so tell us about what makes like what is a psychedelic?
Yeah, so the psychedelic as a term comes from the 1960s when Aldous Huxley was writing to a friend, Humphrey Osmond, and they were exchanging letters about, LSD and psilocybin and mescaline. Like, how do we create a word, a phrase to describe this sort of class of compounds? Because they all seem to be very similar.
Mhm.
And so they landed on the term psychedelic, psyche meaning mind,
Mhm.
and delic comes from delos, meaning manifesting. And the Greeks thought of the mind and the soul as interconnected. So you can even think of it as soul manifesting. And classically, these are 5-HT2A serotonergic agonists.
Mhm.
So there's 14 serotonin receptors in the brain. These are most active on the 5-HT2A
Mhm.
receptor, which is tied to executive function, which is tied to neuroplasticity, which is tied to decision making and sometimes strategy and planning.
Mhm.
And there's three main types of psychedelics. So you have tryptamines, which are psilocybin, and also DMT is a tryptamine, dimethyltryptamine. You have lysergamides, which is LSD, lysergamide LSD, and you have phenethylamines, which is mescaline, which is found in peyote and San Pedro, wachuma, the Andean cactus, and also MDMA is a phenethylamine. And so these are like the main class of psychedelics. We talk about ketamine a lot. Ketamine is not a classic psychedelic. Ibogaine has been getting more popularity as well. Ibogaine is
Yeah.
not a classic psychedelic, right? These are the three classic psychedelics, the 5-HT2A agonists. And the experiences, while sharing a lot in common, can also be quite distinct and unique, especially when the whole medicine is taken. So psilocybin is an alkaloid. It's also found in mushrooms, right? Mescaline is an alkaloid. It's also found in wachuma and peyote. And so the experience of drinking wachuma is going to be very different than the experience of eating mushrooms, even though these are the same, technically, drug class, if you will.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Okay. To the women listening to the show right now, they're like, okay, how can this help me? This all sounds cute, but I just remember the stoner in high school that couldn't get anything done because they were dropping acid every day. So, like, what's the you talked about microdosing being the bridge. Let's talk about, first of all, what is a microdose and why would someone listening to the show go, okay, this is all very interesting, but how does it help me?
Yeah, so microdosing then is the use of one of these psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, or what we're using is wachuma, mescaline, right? So psilocybin, LSD, wachuma, mescaline. Um, and it's about a tenth of a regular dose. And the thing is with microdosing is it's sub hallucinogenic or sub intoxicating. So you're taking a dose that doesn't dramatically shift your experience of reality. So you can still navigate, you can go about your everyday, you're just a little more energized, your mood is a little bit better. Sometimes people have a little bit more of an optimistic look, it can just help with vitality, overall energy. And it's done not just once, but it's more, you have to think of it more like a meditation practice, right? So when we learn how to meditate, we really, to start to notice the benefits tangibly, you have to sit on the cushion every day for 30 days. And then at the end of those 30 days, you're going to notice, oh, I'm a little less reactive. I'm more patient. My sleep is a little better. I feel less stressed. Great. But if you just meditate once and you expect to have, a profound shift to your nervous system and experience of reality, you're going to be disappointed. And so I think it's similar with microdosing in that it's really about a protocol. The protocol that I have developed is every other day. So about 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for 6 weeks, right? And you're really committing to that full 6 weeks, because some people will start it and they'll go, oh, I'm not feeling much, or I'm not noticing much, or right. Or after just a week or two, they're like, I'm not getting better yet. So I say, give it 6 weeks. Usually the first couple of weeks, we need to calibrate the dose, find our sweet spot, because everyone is different. And then the final 4 weeks, you commit to that and you stick that. And in our protocol, we combine that with a lot of nervous system practices, right? So we have functional breathing and movement and dancing and maybe some sauna or even a cold shower or cold plunge, right? What are different things that help us to come into a more regulated nervous system with an understanding that stress is often the biggest killer, right? Stress is the number one thing that is related to chronic inflammation, cardiovascular disease, cancers, right? It undergirds everything. And so if we can help the system to be less stressed, then we have a chance for everything to be more harmonious. And even in some early clinical research, this is, I think, what's also very exciting, is psychedelics have been shown to have anti-inflammatory benefit. And so inflammation, right? Chronic inflammation is the root cause of a lot of these things. When we get the nervous system to relax, we're all of a sudden, coming into less stress. And then when we have a medicine like San Pedro, which is the most anti-inflammatory. That's why I love San Pedro, Wachuma, mescaline, the most anti-inflammatory. It also helps, the body just to start to clean itself and heal itself. And what I would also say as part of that is, before doing any of this, I would say get blood work done, right? Know what your hormonal levels are, know what's going on for you. There very likely could be other supplementation that you do prior to actually starting a microdosing protocol to help clean things up a little bit before you start. It's a medicine. It can help people feel good, but it also sometimes it gets people to detox things, and sometimes the body has to release things as well.
Well, there's a bit of a, how do I say this? When I have recommended microdosing, I always like to just say a couple of things. I say, don't take it at night unless you really want to have a crazy
Yeah.
sleep. Now, I don't know. Maybe that's just the first time. Maybe that was just me, but don't take it. And the next thing is, don't expect it to heal you. Expect it to show you what needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
What I say is microdosing is not a magic pill, right? We've been conditioned into this sort of taking a pill to fix certain conditions and issues. So I say microdosing is not a magic pill. It is a neuroplastic agent, right? And so I think what's great about it from a physiological perspective is it's helping to boost neuroplasticity. And that seems to give people momentum. And sometimes people who are stuck, who just can't seem to get things going, they need a little bit of a kickstart. And I find microdosing more than anything is that it's a nice little kickstart. It gets energy moving in the right direction.
I remember listening to Tim Ferriss interview Michael Pollan, as we talked about. That was my intro to all of this. And I remember Michael talking about the default mode network. And the only other time I'd heard about that was when I was taking my neurology fellowship. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. There's something here. And so this still remains one of my favorite elements of talking about psychedelic therapy is how we can use it, as you said, for the neuroplastic changes that will help us. The way I like to describe it best, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is it helps us detangle from the ego and the stories we have suction cupped to our faces about who we are and what we represent in the world.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's an agent of destabilization, which sometimes we need to sort of shake off the fetters of the conditioning that we've been subjected to, right? And oftentimes those fetters have a lot of guilt and shame
Mhm.
associated with them. And it's really guilt and shame, it's often a choice of can we let that go, basically? Trauma is different, right? Trauma and PTSD, like acute trauma often needs healing. We need to heal certain attachment wounds. Psychedelics can help with this as well, with the therapeutic alliance and
Yes.
what they do
Yeah. Yep.
for neuroplasticity. And I think the crux of that from a neuroscientific lens is some of the research they've been doing on what's called the critical learning period,
Mhm.
which you've probably heard of. It was most sort of famous about 100 years ago in the sort of duck experiment where ducks were sort of remothered to a human. And
Mhm.
we figured out, if we kind of guide or prime children at a very young age, they're very malleable, right? And the most malleable is when they're 3, 4, 5, which is why we start instruments them, which is why if they're going to learn a second language, start to speak to them in that second language. The brain is super malleable at that age. Well, as we grow older, it becomes more and more rigid and things stabilize as they need to. So we can focus, we can be adults, we can survive, we can get the things done that we need to. That comes, though, especially in modern industrial times, oftentimes there's too much rigidity, right? There's too
Mhm.
much habituation. There's too much pattern again and again and again. We need something to disrupt that. And so when we work with especially high doses of psychedelics, they actually reopen that critical learning period. So our brain returns to the state of a 3, 4, 5 year old. All of a sudden, for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks after that high dose experience, we can actually retrain the brain, especially for attachment things like early childhood attachment. So it's really helpful for healing trauma. It's really helpful for reparenting. It's really helpful for, you know, integrating these maybe abandoned parts or exiled parts that we
Yes.
had shut away at a very young age
Yes.
and starting to become more whole and coherent as a result. And that critical learning period not only applies to trauma, but it also applies to learning new skills, to learning new patterns of behavior, right? Learning new practices. That integration window, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks after a high dose experience, that's where it's most important.
And I can feel the power in the statement that you've just made about our ability to reopen that window and potentially shed experiences that are no longer serving us. And if you're listening to us having this conversation, make sure you're supported. If you're choosing to do something like this and you have big T trauma, even if you got the little T trauma, God knows we accumulate it over time, especially women in midlife. Oh my God. Make sure you're working with a practitioner that can help support your mental health. And those practitioners don't just have to be your traditional psychologist and social worker, although they're excellent at this, even better if they've been trained by Paul. But it's body workers that are helpful as well too. Any sort of physical way that you can discharge these things is helpful. It doesn't just have to be talk therapy. So a dance class is a damn good therapist, if you ask me.
Well, and they've shown that dance is basically twice as effective as all other antidepressants, and
I
and
love
they've done
that.
clinical research on this now. So I agree. Dancing, there's nothing like dancing, and
Nothing.
dancing on a microdose is even better.
Oh, I love that.
Best.
I don't know
Yeah,
if I've tried that. I might have to
yeah, it's
just do
fun.
that.
It's fun.
Okay. What I think about when we talk about the default mode network and sort of shedding the fetters, as you said, it makes me I'm going to make a Star Wars reference. So hopefully you're a Star Wars fan, but before the ships go to hyperspeed, they have to like push off all the space garbage that happens.
Right.
And so
Is
Gen
that
X
Star
is
Trek or Star
painful.
Wars? Do they do that
Star
in Star
Wars.
Wars as well? Is
Star
it? I don't
Wars.
remember that part from Star Wars, but you're more detail oriented than I
No,
am.
I'm more Gen X than you. That's it.
Okay.
I actually saw the first movie in the theater.
Oh, there you go.
Like 1978.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyways, so I love that analogy though, because so often I have conversations with my patients, and I feel this way too, oftentimes and with my friends, is that you just feel like there's so much baggage. Like, how do you bust through that crust to whatever you're trying to get to mentally? And it can feel daunting when you think about doing, let's say, traditional therapy where you're basically sitting in a room talking to somebody for the next 2 Olympics, and maybe you'll feel better at the end of it. But psychedelics can move us faster towards that, yes?
Yeah, yeah, and that's why they come with more risks as well, right? It's when we're that crusty, when we have that much either conditioning or trauma or exhaustion or whatever, burnout, stress, whatever it is, whatever the crust is, you're going to come out very tender, right? And this is why psychedelics work so well. But that tenderness, for a lot of people, they're not used to it, right? It's feeling tender is vulnerable. Feeling vulnerable, feels scary for the vast majority of folks. So feeling safe is essential. For that reason, like you can fully relax and surrender into the experience, feeling safe to cry, feeling safe to yell, feeling safe to express, right? And just allow whatever wants to move through to come through. And great facilitation is equally important then in that regard, because a lot of this healing happens in relationship with another nervous system, another human body, right? There's something about that. Yeah, co-regulation.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love
Yeah,
that.
so the destabilization, it has to happen. The risk is that, some people and sometimes get worse before they get better, right? That sometimes the blinders have been on, or maybe they've been on an antidepressant for a long time, or they've been ignoring something, repressing something. And so when that shadow material surfaces, when we have to start to look at the skeletons in our closet.
Yeah. We're used to pushing it away, right? We've spent decades, potentially our entire lifetimes, pushing it away.
And as a culture, maybe hundreds of years, right? Pushing it away, pushing the shadow away. So
we're talking ancestral, too.
The water we swim in as a Western people in particular, like a Western white people. So we need a way to like open up the ecstatic again, right? That's what a lot of this is coming down to. It's the reclamation of the Dionysus, the reclamation of the Dionysian sort of lens. And that is scary for a waspy culture like ours.
Yeah, privileged waspy culture, yes. If you're anything like me, moving through midlife means bringing a few nagging issues, especially around digestion. Maybe it's bloating after meals, new food sensitivities, or just that sense that your gut isn't as strong or resilient as it used to be. On this podcast, we talk a lot about midlife things like hormones and managing stress, but symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, and immune flare-ups often trace back to one place: your gut lining. Science shows that many common digestive issues stem from a compromised gut barrier, also known as intestinal hyperpermeability. When those tight junctions between cells loosen, unwanted food particles slip through, triggering inflammation and immune stress. That's where the trouble begins. That's why I want to introduce you to Ultimate GI Repair by Level Up Health. This isn't just another probiotic. It's advanced, natural gut healing at its finest. It's designed to restore gut integrity right at the source. What makes it so unique is its peptide-powered gut support, a blend of 4 purified, clinically dosed peptides. The first is BPC 157 for deep tissue repair, Larazotide to reinforce tight junctions, KPV tripeptide to calm inflammation and modulate immunity, and GHKCU to support matrix remodeling and systemic healing. This is true peptide synergy, and it works really well. It doesn't stop there. Ultimate GI Repair also includes zinc L-carnosine to stabilize mucosal surfaces, Tributrin a bioavailable form of butyric acid to fuel intestinal cells, and buffered sodium bicarbonate to protect peptides from stomach acid and enhance absorption. Whether you're recovering from stress or travel or just want long-term digestive support, this formula is comprehensive, hypoallergenic, and third-party verified. Ready to give your gut the advanced support it deserves? Visit leveluphealth.com and use the code LOVELY at checkout to save 15% site-wise. Again, that's LVLUP health.com, code LOVELY. You speak on a different level that there's a lot of people that will not understand what you're saying. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a sense of what you mean.
So I would like to think that, but you're also, because you do the training, I train others to do what I do as well, and I know that there's so much learning that comes from being the teacher of the others. It's not just a one-way street. Like the best way to learn about a subject is to actually teach somebody else about it. I do believe. And I wonder if you've learned to dial back the things that you have learned in your language experience when you're
Uh-huh.
teaching. Do you know what I mean?
It always depends on the medium. Any good communicator will sort of podcasts are a little trickier in that there's sometimes the medium, right? But like I don't know your audience super well, right? I haven't spoken to your audience. I haven't interacted with your audience. Some folks, it's like more newbie beginner, and then some folks, it's like you want the, if it's a psychedelic podcast, depth and go for it, right? So I've definitely learned how to communicate topics that seem complex and abstract and make them more sort of understandable. And my natural style is to be more the philosopher and the sort of metaphorical. If my students understand everything I'm communicating to them, I'm failing in some regard, right? There needs to be some sense of overwhelm or uncertainty or provocativeness for them to actually, like kickstart and figure it out for themselves.
I keep meaning to ask you this because I'm an enthusiast of astrology. Were you born in February by any chance?
Close. I mean, it's my half birthday. So
okay, all right.
I'm a Leo.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains the yellow. Me too. What's your birthday?
Yeah. August 16th.
July 31st. Actually, I think you and isn't that Barack Obama's birthday too?
Madonna's birthday is August 16th. I don't
listen. If you have not listened to her, she's on the Jay Shetty podcast this week talking about the Kabbalah.
Oh,
really good.
Okay.
It's a
That
bananas
cool.
so good episode. Please
That's
go
so
listen.
Fun.
Everybody that's listening to this, and apparently she doesn't do interviews anymore, but she wanted to talk specifically about her spiritual life
With the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, she's been studying it for 30 years.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways,
I could say a lot of comments right now, but
I'm sure. Okay. This is really what I want to get to from the communication point of view. You and I have both taken the experience of psychedelics for therapy. You far more than me, so I'm very much a newbie or a novice. But it changes the way you see the world, which changes the way you communicate and relate to other human beings. That's what I'm talking about. That's the thing that makes you kind of the unusual one in a conversation, because you have seen the shit that the rest of us are hiding behind the curtain, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a transmission there. And it's funny because in social situations, I could play a lot of parts, right? And so there's an energy that's brought in. And there's a transmission that happens. In fact, I gave a talk this past weekend in New York at a fitness conference, and I was prepping with my girlfriend and another kind of co-founder of mine, both women, obviously the girlfriend, but the co-founder as well.
Yeah.
And they were saying how, at the end of the day, I was like going through the talk. Okay, I want to talk about this anecdote. I want to cover this point. But at the end of the day, it's just really the energy that you bring into the space and the transmission of that. Only 10% of it really is the words, right? And this is classic public speaking training and knowledge as well. 10% of what people pick up on is the words. 90% of it is your body language. It's how you say it. It's the cadence that you use. And so I sometimes, like shamans at the end of the day, and I don't consider myself a shaman, but shamans are in many ways, people think this is vulgar, but they're entertainers, and they're creating a sort of context, and the details are dialed in, and they're using oftentimes very enigmatic or mysterious things to help the mind not be able to compute in the same way that it was before. And then add psychedelics, and it's great. But I think the more that we can be shamanic in our delivery, in our communication, especially if we're doing this deeper work, while still having enough practicality that people can go, okay, yeah, microdosing is, 2 or 3 days a week, and it's this amount, and here's what you need to watch out for. But I'm not necessarily a in the weeds type of guy.
Yeah,
when it
that's
comes
fair.
to these things.
Yes, that's fair. You have to speak about it. I've learned from speaking about it that you have to approach it with a angle that is more about reading the room than anything else. So maybe that's the entertainer capacity. I don't know.
Yeah, I got hooked in that because when I was 21, I had a final exam in undergrad. I studied history, right? But my professor was cool, and he was a scholar of Tupac.
Like everybody should be.
African-American guy, former military office. And so our final exam was to perform spoken word, spoken poetry. That was our final exam. So I wrote a remix to Tupac and performed it.
Nice.
And I ended up after that just getting hooked on, like that sort of entertainment, performative experience. But when you're with medicine, right, like levity always has to be balanced with gravity.
Absolutely.
So you have to have the depth and the capacity to be with people in that.
By the way, Tupac and Madonna dated, just so you know.
Oh, did they really?
People did not know that. She talks about that a little bit in the interview. Anyways, go on.
That's a great tangent.
That's it's such an interesting way to think about it, really. And I think I learned early on as a practitioner to be good at reading the room too, because people can't hear you unless you show up in a way that they can receive you.
Right.
Anyways. Yeah, go ahead.
And there's lots of little things. I mean, I know this is a bit of a public speaking tangent, but there are lots of things that facilitate that. Like when I go up on stage, before I give my talk, I ask people to like drop in and do 3 deep breaths with me, right? And just sort of like settle their nervous system and create some coherence. And a lot of it is in those, little things.
Yes, absolutely. That is something I do with my public speaking as well, too. Because if you don't get a moment to come together, then they are not going to hear, the audience is not going to hear you in the same way. So this is it's just a good plan. I do that when I'm teaching as well. I'm sure you do too. These are the things that the medicine teaches us. If you're open to it, I like to say. Okay, so let's get practical again for a second. Women listening to the show are going, well, how do I know which one to microdose? Because there are options. He said a bunch. What's the choice? What should I pick?
So mushrooms, LSD, and Wachuma, San Pedro are the 3 core ones. For most beginners, I say start with psilocybin. And the reason for that is because it's much more accessible. It's much easier to be able to acquire. In Canada, and now even in the United States, there are a lot of people that are just doing this openly now. Supplements. Our favorite partner is Golden Rule, and they have psilocybin, LSD, and Wachuma. The trade-off with Golden Rule is they only ship to United States. So for the Canadian listeners, what I would say is go to our website, which I'll mention at the end, Third Wave, and we have a sourcing guide there. And usually what I tell folks is use that sourcing guide to find, like, we're not going to do it for you, but you can figure it out yourself. Some people grow their own mushrooms as well. That's also another feasible. But if you do a tiny bit of digging, it's not like it used to be. Like when I used to start to do this 10 years ago, I was having to download the dark web, go on the dark web, get Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin. And then it was a whole thing. It's how I acquired Bitcoin for the first time and made a lot of money on it. It's like how I bought my car, which was awesome.
Smart. You're very smart.
Yeah. But like, just start with psilocybin. Look, we also have a 6-week microdosing experience. So every quarter I teach a group container, 6 weeks of microdosing. So I would even encourage folks who are listening to this, if you're curious about it, just join our next cohort because you'll be supported. You'll have a lot of structure. We have workbooks. We meet once a week as well. And we coach through psilocybin, LSD, or Wachuma.
Amazing. And just drop the website, please, because I know the ladies will want to go look right now. Where can they sign up for that?
So that's at thethirdwave.co, right? Okay. That's the main, thethirdwave.co. And then psilocybin's a great entry point. LSD, if someone's struggling with ADHD or they just need a little bit of a kick in the pants, LSD is more dopaminergic, so more dopamine with LSD, which is tied to focus, attention, and motivation. LSD can be harder to acquire, although again, Golden Rule, our partner, does have microdosing LSD gummies. on their
Oh,
platform. And it's
there's a
usually something I'd say try after you've tried psilocybin, right? Like it's a little bit more advanced. And a
interesting.
lot of people have skepticism about LSD, right? So that's why it's like start
Please
low,
read
go
this
slow.
book. Ladies, read this book. We just talked about this. The book is called A Really Good Day, and it's by Ayelet Waldman. I know this, I heard about this from Michael Pollan as well.
Mhm.
And it's basically a woman in midlife who is struggling with her mental health, and she manages to get her hands on some LSD, and she does a microdosing course, and then she writes about it. It's a fascinating book. I'll drop the link for the book in the show notes. Paul and I talked about a little bit to start this. That's when I was trying to decide, if I wanted to try this, if this was just a crazy idea that I have, because I do have those from time to time. That book was recommended to me, and it's just, I couldn't put it down. It's one of the best things I've read in the last
Great
10
book.
years. It's a great book.
Great
Okay.
book.
You just said, let's go. We're going to go back. LSD is primarily dopaminergic. And so for anybody struggling with focus, ADD, ADHD, that is a good choice, but always after psilocybin, you said.
Generally, I would say, right? And just to clarify, they are all three are largely serotonergic. LSD
Yes.
is more dopaminergic. So there's more dopamine with
Interesting.
LSD than psilocybin. Psilocybin is almost exclusively serotonergic. And St. Pedro, Wachuma is somewhere in between. And
Oh,
so usually I tell folks if you want to stick to the entheogens, the plant medicines, right? Even though
yes.
mushrooms aren't plants, mushrooms and wachuma are a really good starting point. And like I said, LSD, I would say if someone has never done LSD before and they're going to microdose with LSD, have some structure, guidance. It could be a coach, it could be our group container that we have at Third Wave, but have some structure and guidance for that because
Yeah.
there's a lot more fear usually when it comes to LSD.
Well, I mean, especially for the women that listen to the show, like we grew up thinking this is not like this was the antithesis of what you do as a responsible human being that's working operating in a community, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of, I know I don't have, I'm speaking to the choir here, but there's a lot of mental barriers that come along with that, right? And
For sure.
so I think that's good. I think that's really, really good advice. That's super interesting for ADHD. And I think Eyelet talks about that in the book as well, too. She has an ADHD diagnosis. And as many midlife women find themselves no longer able to mask their ADHD symptoms because of the egress of estrogen and progesterone.
Right. And the disclaimer here is if someone is on any sort of other medical, or psychiatric, med, then always work with a clinical professional if you want to microdose while you're on that and if you want to wean off, because a lot of people are using them to taper, but it's
Yeah.
a complicated process. And so the disclaimer that I always say is if you're interested in this, but you're currently on certain medications, you really need to talk to a medical professional. The great thing I know specific to this podcast, if someone is on progesterone or someone is on, BHRT or other hormones, there's really no major contraindications between low doses and that. The bigger concern would be with psychiatric meds in
Yeah.
particular.
Yes. Okay. And so, who is the mental health professional to help with that? Does it have to be a psychiatrist that is informed on psychedelics?
It could be a nurse psychiatrist, a psychiatric nurse as well.
Okay.
They,
Okay.
they a lot will be informed. A lot of the facilitators that we have a directory on Third Wave with
Perfect.
trained and qualified providers, clinics, retreat centers, and also individuals. And we have quite a few nurse psychiatrists who also do this work to help with tapering. They tend to be more affordable. And if you can afford a psychiatrist and, or you have a psychiatrist you're already working with, by all means, they'd also be a great resource. And if for some reason they're not psychedelic friendly or they don't seem psychedelic educated or informed, I would strongly encourage people to switch to
Mhm.
a mental health professional who knows about psychedelics, because that means they're going to be, I think, more useful, like a better
Yes, and
psychiatrist.
that would be a terribly frustrating job as a psychiatrist because you have almost no tools and how do you fix these massively life disrupting concerns, right? So it believe me, if I was a psychiatrist, I'd be all over psychedelics like a dirty shirt. I'd be on it because there's so many options and help
Well, and a
people.
lot of one of my friends who are psychiatrists, they can't give people LSD or they can't give people mushrooms right now because their license would be revoked. But they can say to clients, go to Third Wave,
Yes.
and like check out microdosing. That might be something you do. I just can't necessarily supply
Talk
it for
about
you.
it.
But if you do it on your own and you want to talk about it, I'm here to support you and help
Yeah.
you navigate that process.
And we very much hope that changes as we start to embrace options and these things become more accessible for people for sure. By the way, your book, Mastering Microdosing, is fantastic. Thank you for
Oh, thank
writing
you.
that book.
Thank you. That's
Very,
sweet.
very helpful.
It's a good
Um,
reference. Good
yes,
practical guide. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely is. Okay, as we start to wind down this conversation, my question that I'm just dying to ask you is, let's just go off into the weeds a little bit here. What is the most bananas thing you've experienced in one of your own trips?
I mean, one of my earliest experiences. So I first did LSD in May 2010. It was the last day of classes, my junior year of no sophomore year of college. Last day of classes, my sophomore year of college, and I took acid with four or five friends. A few days after that, I was going to Tanzania for a May term. I was studying pre-med at the time, so we were going for a biology class, and so I thought that was fun. I'm just going to bring acid with me and take it on safari. So the second time I ever did LSD was on a safari vehicle in Tanzania, and I believe the Serengeti. And then I did it a second time in Ngorongoro Crater. And in Ngorongoro Crater, they're very used to humans, so the animals get very close to you. So you'll be 10 feet away from a pack of lions who will just be there frolicking and hanging out. And so I just remember having this experience with, I took about a tab, one, it's not a microdose, like 100 micrograms of LSD. I just had this deep experience, sort of the cliche circle of life experience, where I was like plugged into this wilderness, right? This wild place. And I could see the entire circle of life sort of occurring in front of my eyes. So it was very meta, it plugged me right into this sense of feeling interconnected to everything. And it's an experience that has stuck with me since.
It actually brings tears to my eyes. I can feel the experience through your words. That's
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you
it
for
was very wild, and I consider myself, like I mentioned, the Dionysian sort of lens, right? That from an archetypal perspective, it feels like that's what psychedelics are calling back up again, and so to have that experience in the wild was profound and impactful.
I'd say. I want to ask you actually, I just had this thought. I've heard Joe Rogan talk about Ibogaine quite a bit for PTSD in veterans. Can you speak a little bit about that, please?
Ibogaine is an alkaloid that comes from iboga, which is a root bark, usually from Gabon, and it's been used by the Bwiti tribe for hundreds of years. And it's recently become more popular in the West because it dramatically interrupts an opioid addiction. It resets dopamine and serotonin levels within, I believe, 72 hours.
Wow.
Which, traditional treatments like Suboxone could take as long as 9 months.
Yeah.
And they've started to do really interesting clinical research on it for TBI. So there was research done by Stanford showing that a single dose of Ibogaine essentially reversed all symptoms of traumatic brain injury in 30 Navy SEAL vets. All 30 had traumatic brain injury going into the Ibogaine experience, not a single one had TBI coming out of it.
Wow.
And so now they're looking at it not only for TBI, but also for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
TBI is
Uh,
concussion, you guys, traumatic brain injury.
Traumatic brain
Yeah.
injury. Sorry,
Yeah.
traumatic brain
Yeah.
injury.
It's okay.
Now they're also looking at it for Alzheimer's,
And
dementia, and Parkinson's. So
Parkinson's.
Brett Favre, who's a very famous
Yeah.
NFL quarterback,
I'm a
has
Packers fan. We're good. Keep
early
going.
onset. He has early onset
Yeah.
Parkinson's, and so
Yeah.
he's now done Ibogaine, and it's helped to reverse his symptoms related to Parkinson's. So it's fascinating. The disclaimer here is Ibogaine is the most potent and strongest of all the psychedelics. It can last for up to 36 hours. Usually an experience is 24 hours. You need medical professional
Yeah.
because people also, if you have a heart issue and you take Iboga or Ibogaine, there's a risk of cardiac arrest.
Mhm.
So I would say it's also probably the most dangerous of all the psychedelics.
And absolutely something that's done under medical treatment. And anybody
Absolutely.
listening can Google this. There are treatment facilities in Mexico that will take care
There's
of
one
you.
in particular called Beyond, Beond, that I
Okay.
usually, when people ask
Would
for a place to
recommend.
go, I say go to Beyond. It's in Cancun and they do great work.
Which is nice, nice too. Okay, so when you're talking about PTSD in a veteran versus the risk of taking a psychedelic that could do all the things that you just talked about,
Yeah.
I would I would think that to get out of the discomfort of the experience of the PTSD, especially the war veterans, it's not even a decision. It's uh, like get me out of this hell I'm in, right? It can't be worse than what I'm already experiencing. So
Right.
I, for one, am quite grateful that this medicine has been shown to us as helpful for the veterans in particular.
ibogaine, MDMA as well for PTSD, right? They're looking at clinical trials for that, and psilocybin as well. So we have a lot of options, which is great.
Amazing.
We need more
Amazing.
options.
Amazing. Did you say at the beginning of this conversation that somebody is looking at menstrual disorders and one of the psychedelics?
So there is a company that's run by Paul Stamets. Paul Stamets is a really famous mushroom sort of figure, thinker, author, and they're doing one, I believe, in Australia, looking at the Stamets stack, which is psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin, done 4 days on, 3 days off to help with PMDD. Because a lot of women have noticed that when they have really painful cramps or really painful menstruation, that when they microdose, it seems to help them harmonize. There seems to be some experience where it helps them also with pain, right? Clinical research has shown that low doses of psychedelics are just as effective as opioids for treating pain and pain
Without all
management,
the
chronic pain management, without all the
without all the stuff.
addictive or
Yeah.
downside. So I think also just helping with pain, helping, things to harmonize. There's a lot of great research when it comes to that. I would say there needs to be more research done, though, generally on microdosing in women, because as a lot of women who are, listeners of your podcast are very aware that a lot of research and clinical trials that are done in white men because they don't have the same variants. And so even a microdosing LSD trial that was done in New Zealand, it was all men that went through that clinical trial. And so it's great. I think we need a lot more women-centric, women-specific research on these low doses of psychedelics, because women need this, especially moms, right? A lot of people are also using this for postpartum depression. A lot of people are microdosing and using psychedelics for that as well.
Which I love. One of my early teachers on this was the Mums on Mushrooms community.
Oh, Tracy, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think
Tracy's
she's been
great.
on your show, yes?
Yeah. Tracy's a good friend. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you tell her
Collaborator.
community was very, very helpful for me when I was learning
Good.
some years ago about this. So, okay, where can people find out more about you and your work, please?
Third Wave, so thethirdwave.co, which I mentioned before. Folks are practitioners or coaches. They're interested in stepping into this lane. You can find out details about our certification, our core training program on thethirdwave.co. And then I'm on social, Paul Austin 3W, or just type in Paul Austin, Instagram, on X, and then also LinkedIn. And I post there pretty often. And if folks listen to this and you have questions, send me a DM on Instagram or send a note into our team, and we're more than happy to help you out with any questions you might have about this, these medicines, this work.
That's amazing. Thank you for being as I like to say on this show, I am just the voice of the goddess. I'm here to show up and deliver the information. It's not coming from my brain. So I do believe that the medicines that we talked about today are a very feminine thing in a lot of ways. You know what I mean when I say that? Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah, thank you for listening to that and for being the mouthpiece for that. I very much appreciate it. And I know that this conversation will be helpful to the women of my community. So thank you for coming on the show. And I have a final question, Paul, that I ask all my guests, if I may. Please have some fun with this, although I don't imagine I have to say that to you. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
Probably just to relax a little bit more, to let things come as they do, to not feel like I'm in a rush or all these things have to get done, to stop and smell the roses a little bit more, especially in my 20s. I feel like in my 30s I'm settling in now, but in my 20s I was very nomadic, traveling all over, always on the go. As I've been settling in, I've been appreciating these slower things. And I probably could have just saved myself a lot of stress and headache if I had just chilled out a little bit more. So
I think that's really good life advice.
Yeah.
Paul Austin, thank you for coming on the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast.
Thank you for having me, Fiona. It was a lovely conversation.
It was a pleasure. The information and other content provided in this show, or in any linked materials, is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise or treatment. We are doctors, but we aren't your doctor. Seek your doctor's opinion. If you or any other person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have heard in this podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The opinions and views expressed on this page and in this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution. Thank you.